Well, hello there, everybody. This is episode 94 at Streets and Eats. And today on the podcast, we're going to be talking about the Vietnam World Heritage Sites and, of course, the coffees you should drink while you're there.
A good coffee pairing. We always need to know.
Welcome to Streets and Eats, the travel and food podcast dedicated to taking our listeners to the sights, sounds, and flavors of fascinating places near and far, both on and off the beaten path. We're Jim and Corinne Vale, and we've been traveling internationally and domestically together for decades, visiting more than 90 countries in all 50 states in the USA. We'll share all of the local knowledge and food expertise we've gathered through years of living as expats in Asia and Europe, as well as traveling with families spanning multiple generations around the world. Join us each week for a new adventure.
All right. But let's start out with a question. I'll ask the question first. I think that this is pretty easy, but you never know. And I definitely think this is something we experienced over and over again. So it's very much dear to my heart. We know what the most popular way to get around Vietnam is.
Sure, motorbike.
But what are the laws? Like when we were driving around, we weren't sure if there were any laws, right? But there are.
That's why I'm laughing.
There are laws. For example, what is the maximum number of people who can ride on a motorbike?
Ooh, there's a law for that.
There is a law for that. And if you think about it, there are plenty of people who can ride at a time.
Yeah.
Physically.
Yeah. I've seen them get quite a few people on a motorbike.
I think the most I've ever seen is maybe 5.
I'm going to take a stab at it, though, because I think typically what you're going to find is a couple and a child. So I'm going to say 3.
And you would be wrong.
No, it's probably 2.
It is 2, which makes sense. That's probably what it is in the majority of the world, right?
Right. And that's common sense tells you really shouldn't put more than 2 people on a motorbike.
Well, and they do. And we know this for a fact. But the whole motorbike culture in Vietnam is just one of those things that you can't get enough of, can you?
It's pretty amazing.
I think it is too. I think one of the things that I always think of, it pops into my head every single time I'm talking about motorbikes, is that the ladies, when they're driving their motorbikes, they have I don't even know what it's called, but a special, almost like jacket, but it's not a jacket because it's so hot there. It's not heavy fabric, but it's like a long dress that they put on to preserve their other clothes. Yeah. It makes total sense, but it's just hilarious.
Long dress goes all the way to the ground, long sleeves, and they usually wear gloves too.
Yeah, they're covered up.
The hood that comes right up tight around their face.
Yep, covered up.
That seems way too hot for me, but I guess you're trying to protect your clothes. That's probably a smart thing to do. And actually, keeping out of the sun keeps you a lot cooler. And it seems like it's always a really light fabric, like a silk or something very breathable. So maybe it's not that hot, but it looks hot.
Well, but they're used to it as well. Even after we were there for a few months, we got more used to the heat. Although I never get completely used to the heat. It's just not my thing.
No way.
All right. Well, getting into our podcast idea of the day, I wanted to do something on World Heritage Sites because if you know anything about us, you know that we're always looking at World Heritage Sites. And when we're planning a trip, that's one of the things that we list out as the World Heritage Sites. And some places have more than others. Vietnam is not a place that has too many. It only has 8 listed. And we still didn't make it to all of them.
Nope, we didn't. Well, because it can be a hard country to travel into the outskirts. Like some of them are a little difficult to get to.
Well, I think going back to motorbikes, one of the best things you can do if you have the, how do I say this delicately, cojones? Then you might want to rent a motorbike, or even a lot of people, I think, buy them for if they're going to be there for a month because it's just that cheap. And then you can ride a motorbike. And if you do that, you can pretty much get anywhere. Although it's a nice long country, it's going to take you a while to do so. But there were a few times when I think I would have liked to be able to have my own motorbike and go where I want to go instead of relying on Grab drivers or tours or buses or trains or whatever. I don't know. I mean, I'm fine not riding the motorbike. We did try it in Phu Quoc, and the guy was like, no, you can't have one of mine.
In some areas, unless you're a really experienced motorbike rider, you really should not be on the road on your own motorbike. But you can always like hire somebody for the day and ride on the back of it. We've done that a few times. But if it's the two of us, unless there's a real reason why we want to be on motorbikes, like when we took that Easy Rider tour, for instance, in Dalat, a Grab car is the way to go because it's air conditioned. It's going to be about the same price for two as it would be for two individuals on individual motorbikes. So why not? And if there's three of you, then it just makes even that much more sense.
And for the most part, I mean, I really love the Grab in Vietnam, and you can, for the most part, get anywhere and do just about anything. But we have run into times when they've refused to take us someplace and they said, oh, no, you will not get a car that goes down that road.
In fact, one of them was in one of the World Heritage sites that we're going to be talking about today. Not actually at the site, but in the region.
In the region,
because it is so remote.
Exactly. All righty.
So where do you want to start?
Well, I think we should start at Hoi An.
Okay.
I think Hoi An is one of the most popular cities and well-known cities in all of Vietnam.
Definitely. It's for tourism especially, yeah.
I don't think there's many people who go to Vietnam and figure out an itinerary and don't have Hoi An on their itinerary. We've actually been there twice because we've been to Vietnam, well, a few times, but 2 main trips. And we went there. It was on our original itinerary, and then we went again these few years later, and it's changed a little bit, but it still holds that old world charm.
Well, yeah. The ancient town, of course, it's UNESCO, so it can't change much or they'll lose their UNESCO status, which is a good thing. That's why we really appreciate UNESCO World Heritage Sites. It hopefully will preserve the history and the culture. And they've done a pretty good job of that in Hoi An. I really think so.
Well, Hoi An, along with Da Nang and Nha Trang, is right smack in the center, well, central coast, I should say, not really in the center of Vietnam. It's on the coast of Vietnam. And it's just this beautiful yellow city that was a huge trading port back from the 15th to the 19th century. And when you go there, it's on the river. It's on what's the name of the river?
The Thu Bon.
The Thu Bon River, which I don't know if you need to remember that, but the river is the life of the city.
Really
and
is.
As you go down by the wharf, you see these beautiful wooden boats with the eyes, and a lot of them are turquoise colored and they're brightly painted. And as you're walking through the wharf, of course, they're going to tout to you saying, do you want to take a ride down the river? And you should, because it's really fun. And it's just beautiful.
Yeah, especially if you do it in the evening when the sun's going down and all the lanterns are coming out and they're putting the lanterns on the water and the whole area is just glowing with light. It's beautiful.
When we were there at the beginning of June this past time, and it was packed.
It's crowded. It's a popular place. That's for darn sure.
With both local and foreign tourists alike. There's just tons of people there. And one of the popular things to do is to make a wish and float your wish down the river in a lighted lantern type of vessel. And I have to say, it is beautiful. It is beautiful. But the whole town is beautiful. Everywhere you go, you have these beautiful yellow buildings that have a unique style to them. And they have the beautiful tiled roofs. And almost all of them, especially in the downtown area, will have lanterns hanging. So one of the things we did was we did a lantern lesson, and that was a lot of fun.
Yeah, we built the typical silk lantern from scratch. I mean,
they taught us how to do it.
They showed us how to do it. And of course, they helped us as we were doing it. But fitting the little bamboo stringers in and shaping it and putting on the silk and all that stuff, we did all that. And they came out really quite nice, I think.
They came out nice, and I just think it's such an iconic thing that you see around the city so much.
It is. It's a great souvenir to bring home from the
to
city.
bring home. Yeah. It also, I mean, the wood framed houses are just stunning. And one of the things you do is you can buy at many of the little houses that you can tour. You can buy a ticket for a combined ticket and you can go into I don't even remember how many houses, but I don't even think we went in as many houses as you could go into, because you'd be walking down the street. Here's this beautiful house. It has either it's just a house by itself, or it'll have like a little museum type of exhibit in it. And you get to walk through them and see the gardens and see the old antiquities and just whatever. And it's kind of a nice way to get to know the town. So, and it's cheap and it's fun and you kind of do it on your own. And
a lot of them are old merchant houses. And so these are merchants that were dealing with trade throughout Southeast Asia. So they collected stuff from all over the place. So a lot of the artifacts that you see in those houses are really kind of unique. You're not going to see them in a lot of other places unless you go to those countries and go to museums.
And one of the things I really liked about Hoi An is the ancient feel of it. I mean, it's a place where, you go down Ho Chi Minh and it feels like a city. Yeah. It's a city that's Vietnamese and it has a very Vietnamese character, but it's just a city. Whereas you go in Hoi An and it feels, I don't know, more traditional. It just feels like you're in a foreign country.
Yeah, that's right. Almost village-like, except
almost
that
village-like.
It's definitely a town. And it was a prosperous town with trade. So it has those, that well-built, grandiose style to the houses, even though a lot of the buildings, I don't think anything is really over 2 or 3 stories.
No.
So it's got a very low-lying profile, which is really cool, especially when you get up on a rooftop cafe or something.
And you can see, which we did. One of the things that's it's famous for is the Japanese bridge, which is a gorgeous pink colored bridge with, the corner dragons on it and everything.
Right, and
Unfortunately, the last time we were there, it was all scaffolded over and it looked like it was going to be that way, I think, for the next 5 or 10 years.
It was pretty permanent scaffolding.
Yeah, but they did let us walk through it. But we're just thankful that we got to see it the first time we were there. And it is a beautiful bridge, but that was a little bit of a disappointment, I have to say.
And you can still go through the inside. And of course, that's pretty well preserved. But yeah, I mean, the view of it from the outside is really striking. They've tried to do a good job of, on the scaffolding, putting up how, they'll put like the mural that shows what it looks like, but it's still a mural on scaffolding. It's not the actual bridge, unfortunately.
One of the things people like to do when they go to Hoi An is, and you can do this all over Vietnam, but Hoi An is the place people go, is go to a tailor and get custom fitted clothes. And we did that the first time we were there. I got a coat, you got a couple pairs of pants,
some shirts.
I don't remember everything that we got, but we did it, been there, done that. So that's why we chose to do other things this time around. And we didn't do it this time, but it is a lot of fun. It's kind of a fun activity. And it is being a merchant, being known for its economy and its selling expertise. It's one of the great places to do that. Now, I wanted to pair coffees everywhere I go, and I just thought it would be kind of cute. If you're going to be in one of these World Heritage sites, this is the coffee you should have while you're there.
That's right.
While we were one of my favorite things that we did when we were in Hoi An is we went to the Reaching Out Tea House, which of course serves tea, but it also serves coffee.
Well, just like everything else, like with the fabric and a lot of other things in Hoi An, they made their claim to fame by trading fabrics, silks, whatever, and of course tea. So a tea house there is a natural thing to do.
Well, this tea house was super special because if you remember, do you remember it?
Oh yeah.
When
it was a beautiful old merchant's house converted into a little tea cafe.
It had a nice little courtyard in the garden where we sat. Actually, you could sit inside or outside. We sat outside, and remember, it was run by deaf people.
Right.
So
and it was set up to give deaf people kind of a chance in the local economy. So they had a workshop where people were actively building things, creating things, jewelry and other artwork. Of course, all the waitresses and waiters were deaf, and everybody who worked there was deaf. So kind of a cool concept.
It was very tranquil.
It was very quiet and tranquil.
And I had the tea because it was a tea house. So I thought, well, I'll go with the tea. But you went ahead and went for the coffee because when we were walking in, we saw somebody who had it. I have to say, it was hard to go with tea. So Jim got the coffee, and you got a straight up black drip on the fin coffee, and that's it. The Vietnamese coffee is made, and all their coffee is made with what's called a fin.
Right.
It's a PHIN. And basically that is, you put the coffee in, you pour the water on top of it, and then it seeps in drip by drip. And we have a whole article on coffees that you can look at, but this was the place, because it was so traditional, that just the plain old traditional fin coffee was what you got, and it was gorgeous, and I think you loved it.
It was quite delicious, and it came with the most amazing little cookies. Do you remember those?
Ginger cookies. I do remember. How could I forget? I got some of those too with my tea.
Really good.
Anyway, so Hoi An probably ranks up there as one of my favorite places. The last time we were there was a little bit more crowded than I would have liked, but we went during the height of tourist season. So what do we expect?
Yeah.
I think if you go anytime, we were there in June. If you go pretty much any other time of year, there wouldn't be quite as many people, but it's always really, really popular.
Yeah, I think I agree with you. It's pretty high up on my list as far as places in Vietnam go. And yeah, it probably would be higher if somehow we could figure out a timing where you could go there. And I don't think you'd ever have the town to yourself or be sharing with only a few other people. But this last time, like you said, it was hard to walk around at night, especially. So that does detract from it. I would definitely keep that in mind if you're planning your trip to Vietnam. Look for shoulder seasons, off seasons. It's never a bad time to go to Vietnam as far as weather goes.
Weather-wise,
you might get wet, but you won't get cold, or you will get too hot if you go during the wrong time.
Well, it's always hot there. You're going to get too hot no matter what. Okay, so that's my first one I want to talk about. The second one I want to talk about blew me away, and we've also been here 2 times. We went on our first trip, and we went on our second trip. And that is, they call it in the World Heritage Site, the Ensemble of Monuments of Hue, because Hue was an ancient capital of the country. And let me tell you, you can tell. What a rich city. Yeah,
there's just so much there. And the Perfume River runs right through the middle of the city. So all of those monuments, the Imperial City and Palace, are right on the banks of the river. And of course, everything grew up around the river. So it's just a cool place to go and walk along the river, explore the monuments. The first time we went, we took the dragon boats up the river and visited some of the monuments further up the river that way, outside of Hue. That's a really cool thing to do too.
Mm-hmm. Well, there's lots of different tours you can take. And I would have to say that by trying to plan which monuments to go to, taking a tour isn't a bad idea, because you just pick the tour and go for it instead of trying to figure out which ones you want to do. But they do have a combined ticket. Before you go into the Imperial City, which is a major part, everybody's going to go to that, which is right in the center of the old town of Hue. And I think we spent almost 3 hours there.
On this last trip, we definitely did, even though it was a blazing hot day.
Right.
For some reason, the first time we went, I think it was in the middle of the rainy season, and we opted more to spend time exploring the monuments further outside the city, up the river and whatnot. So we didn't really spend that much time.
But we did go.
We did, yeah.
We just didn't see nearly as much as we saw on this trip.
So this time we focused more on getting into the Citadel and just exploring it. And it is vast, sprawling, so many different areas. We probably, even with all the hours that we spent in there, still missed something, I'm sure. Yeah.
Well, you spend 3 hours wandering around an old site, and I don't know about you, but that's about my limit.
Especially in the heat and the humidity.
Exactly. But I have to say, one of the things that was really cool is that it is maybe the most popular thing for Vietnamese tourists to do as well, because of its importance. And everybody, all the women, every single one of them had on their traditional áo dai that they wear. And I mean, the photos were just spectacular because the architecture is gorgeous. There's beautiful colors. The gardens are so manicured. It's well taken care of. It's easy to walk around. It's nice and flat, but it's just so rich in things to do and little buildings to go in. And there's a water thing over here, and there's a wooden temple over here, and it's almost overwhelming. There was so much to do.
It could be. That's true. But yeah, it is just a striking place for photography, for especially portrait photography, dressed up in colorful clothes. I think we probably spent time taking pictures and asking if we could take pictures of women in their Aodai, just because it is just so incredible.
Well, and the reason it was so popular too is because prior to 1945, it was the last royal dynasty and they poured all their money into it. So basically the time frame is like 1802 to 1945. So it's not that old, but it feels old when you're in it, of course, but it's not as old as some of the other things like my son that we went to as well.
So going to the Citadel is almost always going to be the first thing that tourists are doing in Hue. And there's a ticket stand right there at the entrance where you have to decide right up front, what ticket do you want? There's a ticket to the Citadel, which gets you into the grounds and the Forbidden City and all that stuff right there in Hue. And then there are, I think, 3 other levels of tickets that include the Citadel, plus 1, 2, or 3 of the tombs and mausoleums from the emperors that are further out. And that's what we did. When we did the Dragon Boat, we went to a couple of the tombs that way. And this time we went ahead and got the 4-banger ticket where you get the entrance to the Citadel and then 3 other of the tombs and mausoleums further out. Figuring, while yes, we had seen some of them on the previous trip, there's no way you're going to see all of them unless you spend a week there. So there's always room to see another temple, mausoleum, tomb, whatever.
And I thought all the ones that we went to, they were all a little bit different.
That's right, yeah.
But they all had, of course, a lot of similarities in the design and stuff like that. But they were beautiful and they were not busy.
No, that was kind of nice to get out there and really get away from the crowds. A lot more quiet, a little bit of solitude that you could just sit and kind of think a little bit and just enjoy sitting in the shade and watching the few people that were going by.
I remember at one of them, I'm not sure which one it was, but we're wandering around and we're all thirsty. And we decide we want to go in for a drink. So there's pretty much a cafe at every one, not really. I don't know if they're part of the site, but naturally, because they are tourist sites, they grow up right outside the gate or whatever.
Right.
Anyway, this one was inside the site though. And we went in and it's open, the door's open, and we go in there and there's nobody in there. And we're like, what's going on? So we just sort of sit down and wait. We're patient. Who cares? We're not like we're in a rush or anything. And finally we're like, we made noise and
up pops this lady.
Up pops his head about 20 feet from us.
She'd been taking a nap.
Yeah, she took her noontime nap. I think she kind of looked at us with her tousled hair with this look of, why are you waking me up? So we, of course, ordered something. She was a little happier at that point.
She was. I think we had, and they had actually had a refrigerator with coconuts in it. So we had cold coconut water.
Which is always good. Always good.
Which is always a go-to in Vietnam when you're really hot and you're just looking to rehydrate.
But speaking of coffee pairings, Hue is one of my favorite coffees in the whole country.
Oh, yeah.
And we found this out on the first day, right after we were finished with doing the Citadel. We kind of had the idea. We knew that the Café Boy, where salt coffee was invented, was not far from the Citadel, but this place is sprawling.
It is.
It was nice that we kind of figured it out ahead of time because we made sure to end up by the back gate, so to speak. I mean, there's a couple of back gates, but this one is basically across the wall. What was it? I think it was like not even a 10-minute walk, a 5-minute walk.
From the back gate.
From the back gate
to
the cafe.
Right along the outer moat, which was filled with lotus flowers, and you can still walk around and see the wall. So it's a nice walk.
So it was beautiful anyway. It was just fine. And I had been wanting to try salt coffee since we moved to Vietnam. I'd heard about it, but it's not that hard. That's not that easy to find in Ho Chi Minh.
Right.
So I
It's
never
not really
tried
a Ho
it
Chi Minh
there.
thing.
It's more of a central Vietnam. And in Da Nang and Hoi An and all of those places, you can find it pretty ubiquitously because it is very popular. But we figured since we hadn't tried it yet, we might as well wait till we get to Hue. We got to Hue. It was the number one on our list of things to do. That's not, World Heritage Sites.
Right.
And we went over there and it was packed. There were so many people there, but we did find a table. We sat down. They spoke English. They were very used to having all kinds of tourists from all over the world because it is such a popular place. And it was beautiful. I would love watching them make it over at their station. And then they brought it to us and it was delicious. I mean, it may be my favorite Vietnamese coffee, even though I got to say, I've never had a Vietnamese coffee I didn't like.
No. But I will say this about the cafe itself. We've talked about coffee cafes in Vietnam before. And while this was not in a big city where you would find yourself walking down like a narrow alleyway between tall buildings, all grungy and thinking, how is there possibly a cafe at the end of this? It was very similar. The only indication that it was where we were looking was a small sign on the side of a brick fence and a little narrow gravel alleyway that looked like it led off to nowhere. But of course, it's a popular place, and there had been a couple of motorbikes going in and out with couples on them. So
Yep.
you know there's something down there. So yeah, we walked down thinking, well, it's got to be it. There's a sign.
And there was.
And
it was packed.
And it was a beautiful little garden area, covered terraces. And yeah, the coffee was amazing.
So
Really
good.
good.
And it's just what it says. It's basically the coffee with milk with salt in it.
Yeah. Condensed milk, of course. So it's got sweetness already. And then I guess the way it originated was the wife or the new wife of the husband was supposed to make coffee for him. And this one particular instance, she put salt instead of sugar in it and found out it was delicious. So it stuck.
And now there are people all over the country trying to emulate it. When we were in Ho Chi Minh, I remember reading a post on Facebook from this one girl who said, I learned how to make salt coffee.
Oh.
Come to my cafe so you can try it. And like I said, in Ho Chi Minh, I hadn't really made it down there yet. So she was probably one of the first, which is impressive for a place that size. But it's just kind of funny. It is very, very popular.
And really, it worked out pretty good because the way we had done Hue on this trip was hiring a Grab driver for the day. And so even though he dropped us off at the other end of the Citadel, we didn't have to walk all the way back
To where a car was
after we
parked or whatever.
finished
Yeah.
our coffee because we just called him up and said, or actually we WhatsApped him, I think, and said, hey, we're at this spot right here. Come and get us.
And he
And
did.
he did. And then he took us off to the different, we used him to take us
The next day.
the next day to the different mausoleums and the tombs. And it worked out really good.
Which is kind of a Vietnamese tip.
Oh, yeah.
When you go to a new place and you get a Grab driver and you like that person and you have a plan for the next day, just go ahead and tell the guy, we want to hire you for the day the next day. And usually you can do that with no problem.
Right. And you don't do it through the Grab app, and you can usually
Exactly.
save a little bit of money. And he makes more money that way too, even if he charged the same as what the Grab app does, because he doesn't have to pay commission. So,
Exactly.
little secret tip. Even really works good. Like you said, when you're in a new place and you're not necessarily looking for someone for the whole day on your first trip, but what you do is you take a Grab, like maybe to a cafe in the morning. And while you're in that Grab, you're chatting to the driver, trying to decide if that's going to be a good fit for you. Does he speak good enough English if you need it? And if they do, then you kind of spark up that conversation at that point. And then after they're done with your cafe, you have the contact details and then you can go from there. That works really good.
And it almost always works. We've only been turned down, I think, twice. And both times those were because someone else
Right.
had already hired them because they were someone who spoke English pretty well and they had already hired them for the day. So it's a very common practice, sort of under the table, but common nonetheless.
Yeah. And works really good in most of Vietnam.
So in that same area of Hoi An and Wei is also the Mison Shrine. And Mison we did not go to this time around because we went on the first trip that we were here. And quite frankly, it's a complex of ruins. And so I didn't see any reason for us to do it twice.
Yeah, right.
I mean, you've done it, you've seen it. It was amazing. I would highly recommend everybody go to it, but I don't need to do it twice. With limited time on any visa, you want to make sure that you get the most out of what you're doing.
Well, and we were going to Nha Trang, which it's one of the places where one of those Cham temples can still be found in a much easier place to get to. Remember the 3 temples? Ponagar. Yeah, exactly. So we knew we were doing that this time, so it wasn't quite as critical that we get back out to Cham or out to Mison, which, like you said, is pretty far out there and
not that easy to get to.
And it doesn't really change over the years. So not really a whole lot of reason to go back once you've been once, but really a stunning, sprawling complex of Cham temples with the tall towers and the bas relief carvings all around them. Very reminiscent, very strong Hindu influence. Yeah. So super cool stuff.
Super old.
Especially out in the jungle and
from the 4th to the 13th century. That's quite a long time.
Yeah. Some of the oldest things that you're going to find in Vietnam, actually.
And basically you walk around this site and there's lots of beautiful buildings and it's really nice, but it's hot as heck because it's the middle of the jungle. But it is beautiful. And it's impressive that with those type of conditions that the site hasn't been more eroded. I find that every time I see the Cham Towers anywhere, it's like, wow, I can't believe how old these are.
Yeah.
So the shrine towers, they feature a lot of architectural designs, and really it's supposed to be, what do you call it? A kind of like a giving to the Mount Meru, which is the mythical sacred mountain, which is the cradle of the Hindu gods and the center of the universe. And I have to say, when you see kind of like their gabled roofs with their bas relief of the gods inside, you can see how that works towards that. It's pretty cool.
Yeah. And that the brick and the stone that they use is like really a strong red color.
Yeah.
And it's really striking.
And it's just really beautiful. Well, it's not the easiest place to get to. I mean, it's very popular and it is a World Heritage Site. So it's not that it's that hard to get to either.
Right.
But you can, of course, take a tour, or you can tell your hotel you want to go there and they'll figure out a way for you to do it. And you don't have to worry about it. Or like we do for pretty much everything in Vietnam, is you can hire a Grab and they will hang around and wait for you. So it's really not a problem. Once you get to the area, again, it's pretty flat, but there are it's an ancient site. So there's lots of places that you could easily stumble. And if you're not a steady walker, they do have the opportunity for you to rent an electric buggy and go around that way, which is not a bad idea if you tend to have trouble walking, or if the heat is going to get to you.
Yeah. And it's a pretty good distance between some of the sites. So it's not a bad idea.
So let's get to the coffee. Which is my favorite part. You've been tromping around my son. You're sweaty. No matter where you're tromping around, you're going to get sweaty in Vietnam. And okay, so that brings me to something that's important about coffee culture in Vietnam.
Which we probably haven't mentioned yet.
It took us a while to figure this out. We would go to a cafe, and a lot of times in Ho Chi Minh, you're in a pretty big, nice air-conditioned cafe. And we just didn't really think about it. And we would order a coffee, and sometimes we would get a cold one. We'd be like, we didn't want a cold. We didn't say we wanted cold. They're going to always give you cold unless you specify you want a hot. In this case, you want a cold one.
Yeah, in almost every case. The cold coffee is better than the hot coffee. Hot coffee is good too.
It's not that it's better. It's just that you're in a hot climate. So it feels better.
At some point in time, whether it's on your walk out to a different site or heading back to the entrance, the electric buggy is going to look more and more tempting. So what are you going to find at the electric buggy stop? A little cafe with coffee. And the best thing to get when you're there is just order a coffee. And if you just order a coffee in Vietnam, it's almost always going to be a coffee with condensed milk and ice.
Which is café sua.
Yeah. And it's delicious. Now, I don't like to put a lot of sugar in my coffee.
And you don't need to with the condensed milk.
And you definitely don't need to add it when it's got the sweetened condensed milk already. If I'm drinking coffee, a lot of times I'll put milk in it, but I won't put sugar in it. But in Vietnam, you're going to get it with condensed milk. And quite frankly, it's delicious. Go with the flow. Enjoy that iced coffee. It is so good. And you know what? You can sit there in the shade, sip on your iced coffee, and watch 1 or 2 or 3 of the electric buggies go by and wait till like there's no line. And then just go out and easily walk aboard the next buggy that you can climb on and head back to the entrance.
It's all about the coffee. And it's just fun to sit and watch people anyway. Okay, so that's my son. And that's basically the middle of the like I said, the middle of the coast, central Vietnam. Not far from there is in the Binh Minh province, and a little bit more north, outside of, a little bit closer to Hanoi, is the Trang An landscape. And that is more of a natural World Heritage Site than a cultural one, although there's plenty of culture there, trust me. And what it is this huge, humongous, gorgeous, sprawling landscape of rice fields and karst mountains jutting out of them. Mm-hmm. So it's like really, really flat. And then you'll have like this pinnacle of limestone mountain
just climbing into the sky,
huge,
straight up.
And they're all over, and they're almost like they were dropped from outer space and speckled around.
It's true, yeah.
It's kind of interesting.
And little waterways that kind of weave their way around all the mountains and through the fields. And it's just a beautiful area.
And so when you're there, you can take a boat ride on the Trang An part of it. And then there's another boat ride on the Tom Kok part of it. And then there's a few other things to do in the area as well.
A lot of people will pick one or the other.
Yeah, exactly.
Because, what do you need to take a little boat
twice
around different
in two and 2 days mountains. Like we did?
Yeah. What's the point of that? But what we found was there's very different. Good reason to take both rides. They're different. It's all stunning, beautiful landscape. If you got
There's
the time.
no other way to do it. You can't.
That's right.
You can take a ride around and you'll see some of it, but you're not going to get the full experience unless you're right in the middle of the boat. And we were there during a rice harvest.
That's right.
So a lot of the boats that were on the river with us were collecting their rice stalks and put them in the boat, and they were piled high.
It was a good time to be there.
It was really cool. And the other thing that was in season were the lotus flowers.
Mm-hmm.
So there were lotus fields everywhere. I mean, it was just, so here's when you have to kind of weigh, it's popular tourist season, but for a reason. I mean, you've got lotus bloom, and you've got the rice harvest, and you've got just gorgeous sunsets and a beautiful area. Yes, there were a lot of people at both places, at Tom Kok and Trang An. But you know what? We loved it. And you're only in a small boat with, one time we had only 3 other people with us, and another time we only had 2 other people with us. So it's not like you're fighting tens of people in the boats.
Yeah.
Is that right?
I think at Tom Kok, wasn't it just the 2 of us?
No, I don't think we only had us at all, did we?
Yeah, I was thinking it was just the 2 of us. It's a smaller boat.
Remember. I don't remember being worried about it either.
No, they're not big boats. These are tiny little boats with one person in the back handling the oars. In Trang An, they're just rowing, like regular rowing. But at Tom Kok, they're using their feet
a lot of times
to paddle. A lot of them will do that, which is pretty cool.
So the first day we went to the Trang An one, and okay, so both Tom Kok and Trang An had that whole Disney-esque feel where, you're kind of go and buy your tickets, and then you have to go, and then someone finds you I don't know. It's just, I don't know. It's just kind of one of those tourist experiences that make you feel like you got to go through the
maze line and all that stuff.
But they had good food at both places, good coffees, good drinks, good juices, lots of things in the area to see and buy, souvenirs and stuff. And the boat rides were just beautiful both days. The first day, we chose, you can pick one of 3 routes, and we chose the route where you got off the boat a lot of the temples.
It was a longer route. You could get off and explore a little bit some of the temples, as opposed to just taking the boat ride through a couple of caves. So that was really cool. And
the only thing you had to remember is, and we didn't really think about this beforehand is you had to know which boat number you were because luckily, as we were getting off to go on our very first little tromp into the temple, we heard someone saying, what was our boat number? Number 16? And we're like, oh, that's a good idea because there must have been 30 boats lined up there. And I don't know about you, but I had no idea what our driver looked like.
Nope. Well, she was covered up to protect herself from the sun with the conical hat and everything. So you never really got a good look at her anyway. That's true.
But I'm sure she would have called us. If
and we were on that boat
with
with 2 other guys. And so it was also a little bit easier because we had struck up a conversation with them a little bit, getting on the boat and a little bit on the boat. And then when we got off that first stop, so we knew them and we were able to kind of keep an eye on where they were going. And we found the boat okay that time. Now, the second time we got off the boat, they dropped you off in one area and then you walk through the temple and you walk through the forest and across a bridge.
And then they picked you up at a different spot.
In another area where there was cafes and stuff. And while we were there, our boat driver had gotten off and probably gone to use the bathroom or get a drink or something. I don't know. But she didn't tie up the boat quite properly. And so I'm sitting there on the quay and all of a sudden I see this chain kind of slipping into the water and this boat floating away. So I run down the steps and I grab the chain and I bring it back and I secured it. And of course there's 10 other boats there with their drivers in them. And they're just kind of watching the whole thing and chuckling and laughing. And as soon as I secured it to the shore, they all start clapping. It's kind of funny.
The hero of the day.
Yeah.
Anyway, so that was pretty cool. The only thing I remember about that too is, it was so overtaxed as far as electricity that we went and we were like, well, we're not really going to get anything to eat, but we wanted to get a snack. And I like to support the people that are out there,
That's right.
So we went and got an ice cream.
It was half melted coming out of the freezer.
It was already half melted before we even started eating it.
I think
it was so
I think
hot.
we probably ate about 2/3 of it. The other third just melted off.
Yeah, I think so too.
They did give you umbrellas at that one, and they were nice big umbrellas to protect you from the sun, which was kind of cool. And then you'd come up to the first cave that we went through. You see the cave coming and you're like, oh, I better put my umbrella down. So you put your umbrella down and tuck it away. And then you get to the cave and you get dripped on all the way through the cave. So after that, you're like, can I keep my umbrella
But you don't want to because
it's a really low ceiling.
So low, yeah. Was there, and then on the Tom Cook boat ride, so we were kind of like, should we really go on a boat ride again? It's going to be pretty much the same, but like we said, it really wasn't the same. And one of the things that was really cool about this boat ride was that at one part they had a floating market.
Oh yeah.
I felt that they were a little pushier than I like, but.
Well, it was a floating market for the boat rides.
Exactly.
It wasn't like a village floating market that other people were going to come to.
But it was still neat.
But it was still pretty cool.
But one thing that was, I thought, very interesting too, and I don't know if they always have this, but the day we were there, they had these 3 ladies, Jess and Al singing on the side of the river. Yeah. And it just sort of echoed on down the river. It sounded so beautiful.
It was really cool.
It was just a really neat day. It would kind of
echo through the tunnels, through the caves as you went through them. And that was the area where we were going through a lot more of the rice fields. So we did see a lot more activity
harvesting and
in
stuff,
the fields themselves.
It's just, it surprised us at how much different it was, for sure. Afterwards, the first day after we went to Chang'an, we went up and climbed the mountain. And the mountain is Muahua, where they have some caves and stuff. And it's called Lion Dragon Mountain. And so here's the thing about it. It was like 560 steps or something.
That's a lot of steps.
Which is really hot and cranky inducing. But what it did do and why it was worth it was that you looked out over the Chang'an landscape and you saw these rice fields and the beautiful river. And of course, we went purposefully during sunset so that we could get a beautiful sky and everything. And I got to say, it was magical. Now, my hair was a mess. Yeah. I was sweating profusely. The pictures of us are kind of, really? You showed that to people? But the actual experience was pretty impressive. The other thing is there was a main sort of, what do you call it? Like observation platform where a lot of people were. There were people everywhere, but there was a lot of people on this observation platform. They were scaring the you-know-what out of me.
Yeah, of course.
They were climbing up on the thing.
Oh.
We must be 1,500 feet up in the air over the...
Pretty much sheer cliffs to the rice fields below.
And they're just everywhere. I'm like, I'm going to see someone die tonight. I just know I am.
Yeah, but nobody did.
Nobody did, thankfully. Knock on wood.
And yeah, while of course sunset is a great time to be there, another good reason why you want to do it late afternoon is because during that time, the stairs are in the shade. I couldn't imagine doing that in the morning.
Yeah, with the sun beating on you.
Oof. No, thank you. But that area also had really gorgeous, humongous, sprawling lotus flower fields.
Mm-hmm.
So that was really cool with little wooden walkways that went out into them and around.
That was really pretty. Right in the same area. Anyway, it's a great place to go. Maybe one of my favorite parts of the trip. And there was lots of good parts. Vietnam was an amazing destination. But this is where you definitely want to try my favorite Vietnamese coffee. And that's an iced coconut coffee. And I got to tell you, I learned about coconut coffee in Ho Chi Minh. And I had been drinking it pretty much all over the country. So I tried a lot of coconut coffees, but it's just like this frozen sort of frappuccino-y kind of texture. And it's, it's got the ice and it's got the whipped cream and it's got the coconut flavor and it's just so refreshing. You can sweat all you want and it just makes you feel so good. In fact, I probably got brain freeze numerous times from them because I just want to suck it right down. But it's so, so good. So, but after climbing that mountain, after riding those boats, I think on that trip alone, I probably had about 4 or 5 coconut coffees.
That's a good way to go. And my favorite coconut coffees are the one that they bring you. Usually comes in a tall glass and it'll have like a coconut slushy inside, which is really good by itself. But then there's also a shot of coffee and you just kind of drizzle the coffee into it and just let it kind of swirl its way in. That is so good.
So good. It's so satisfying visually really and the taste of it.
It really is.
So one of the things on this trip that really defined our Vietnamese trip the last time around was caves. Everywhere you go, there's caves, and more caves. And because of that, this next World Heritage Site almost didn't make our itinerary.
Yeah.
It was a pain in the tail to get to. And what is it? It's a place to go see caves.
Yeah.
I got to tell you, I'm so glad that we did not take it off our itinerary. It was amazing. It's called the Phong Nha National Park. And it's home to lots and lots of caves. I mean, I don't even know how many, 20, I think they told us, or something like that. And
the
one
largest
of them,
ones in Southeast Asia, too. And they're probably actually all interconnected somehow.
Yeah.
If you delved through them deep enough and found your way around.
It does include the largest cave in the world, which is the Song Dong Cave, which we did not go to because basically it's so far out there that you had to spend, I think, 3 days total just to do that one cave. And that was just a little bit much for my itinerary.
It's like an overnight, it's a day-long trek, spend the night in the jungle and then trek to the cave, go through the cave, and then reverse the process coming back.
Yeah.
So,
I mean,
a bit much for us.
And like I said, we went to lots of caves. So did I need to see the actual largest one? I was okay not seeing it. I did go to the national park and we did go to a couple caves while we were there. So I feel like we did our due diligence.
And they were incredible.
And they were incredible. And there's no.
And I used to think that,
one cave is just like any
just
other
like
cave.
Waterfalls. Yeah. When you look at them, they're all a little bit different, but basically they're the same thing. Caverns are the same way. Yeah, stalagmites, stalactites, they're all going to have them. But I got to tell you, the caverns we went to in Vietnam, I think were more spectacular than almost all the other caves I've ever been to.
Yeah, pretty cool. Anyway, so here this cave system is right in the middle, of course, of a tropical forest. And it's hot. So one of the things that's nice about going caving is caves are never too hot.
That's right.
So you get to cool down. It's part of the Annamite mountain range in the Quang Binh province. And if it sounds like it's hard to get to, it's because it is.
Yeah.
I think we spent more time trying to figure out how to get here, how much time to spend here, and how to get out of here than we did for the rest of the trip.
For anything else. Yeah.
It was just like, yeah.
And in the end, I think, I wouldn't say that we gave up, but it turned out to be the easiest way to do it without spending too much money. Was just to let the homestay where we booked send a taxi to pick us up at the train station and then bring us back when we were done.
So we flew in.
Yeah.
So it's in the middle of nowhere. So you could take a train there both ways, no problem, but you're going to spend a lot of hours on that train. And that just sounded like too much for us. So we decided to fly one direction and take the train to Da Nang on the way out because we weren't going quite as far. And that worked out. I mean, the inner flights on Vietnam Air are not that much, so it wasn't too bad.
They tend to go pretty often, at least daily, if not several times a day, even to Dong Hoi, which is where we flew to.
Which is
not big.
We don't know.
Yeah.
Middle of nowhere, but it's an
Vietnam,
airport.
Near the coast.
And we did go to a cafe there.
Yeah. And from there, you head to the mountains.
That's it. But this whole park has like 104 kilometers of caves and underground rivers. And it's just one of the most amazing places I've ever been. So it was well worth the trek to get there and the trek to get out of there. We stayed at, as Jim said, at the Phong Nha homestay, which was run by an Australian, and it was quite the sanctuary. It was beautiful. The rooms are nice. The outdoor area where the restaurant and the pools were very comfortable.
The pool was shaded, which is critical.
Yeah, it was. Well, and you don't see that. It may be critical, but it doesn't happen.
No.
And they also provided all kinds of tours and things right through them.
That's true. They did.
So that made it a little bit easier to do some of the stuff. For example, the first day we did it on our own, and it turned out to be kind of a little bit of a boondoggle, to say the least. We got to where we were going, but then we couldn't get to the second place. That's where we were turned down. So we ended up going someplace we didn't even plan on going. And then luckily that person said, yes, I can take you back. And he charged us like any card would. And then we went back, and it didn't turn out bad. It's one of those travel days that it was just a little bit harder maybe than it needed to be because we didn't know what the heck we were doing.
Well, and this is a very remote area. So your Grab app really wasn't doing anything.
Exactly.
There were no taxis. In fact, we ended up sharing our Grab with one of the other women that was staying solo.
I forgot about that
at
part.
The homestay.
It was even worse.
Who, after our boat ride and everything, had gone off into the town to find her way around, and she was going to find her way back, but she couldn't because there was no transportation.
Nope. So she ended up going with us again. And then we ended up leaving her. Oh, it was just, it was a boondoggle. It really was so weird.
That was definitely like we've been saying Grab works great in Vietnam until it doesn't. And when you're in a remote area like that, that's when it starts to fail you.
Exactly.
So having the homestay offer all of these different things was actually really nice. And while a lot of times we're kind of reticent to just jump on board and do whatever tours our hotel is offering and do it that way, we'd much rather do it ourselves. Because we like to do things
independently. We're headstrong that way.
Yeah. Well, and you tend to have more opportunity. Well, you always have more opportunity for little spontaneity, which is always nice. But in this case, yeah, it worked out. So, so that first day we decided we were going to go into Phong Nha caves, and it's a boat ride into the caves. Now we had done the Trang An and the Tam Kok caves. So I'm thinking it's going to be something really similar. We're going to take this boat into this low-lying cave where you don't really see anything.
You go in and out of the caves.
You go through it like a tunnel. Whoop-de-doo. But no, we get to the place where the boats start, and it's a good couple of kilometers away from the cave. I mean, you don't have any clue where the cave is from that point.
No.
We go to buy tickets, and this is where the fun starts.
Yeah.
Because we don't speak a lot of Vietnamese, and the woman selling the tickets actually didn't speak a whole lot of English. So we're looking at the signs, and we're trying to figure out the prices, and we can't really figure out. Well,
we figured it out. We knew it was going to cost, I forget the amount of money, for the whole boat.
For the boat.
But there's nobody around us. Nobody is around us. And we're like, Okay, so now I can understand. I had read that you were supposed to try and get people to share the boat with, which would have been a good idea to go with the tour at this point, because we're like,
Yeah.
we're all by ourselves. We're gonna have to pay this exorbitant price, which of course is not really exorbitant, but it is if you are used to being in Vietnam. And so we were like, okay, we'll just wait around a little bit until some people come. And then there was an Indian family that came, and then there was this woman.
Yeah, and they were trying to do the same thing. They're like, ooh, we need more people. This is not going to work. So they really wanted to hang out and wait for more people.
Even more than we were willing to wait for.
There's now, I think there was like...
We end up with 7.
7 of us. And the boat holds like 12, right?
And they wanted to wait for 12.
So they wanted to wait for 12 to maximize it or minimize it, I guess. We're like, you know what? I mean, we could have paid for the boat for ourselves. It wasn't exorbitant. It's really cheap. So we finally talked them into saying, there's 7 of us. That's pretty good.
And there was nobody coming. There was nobody coming.
Yeah. And so we did it, and we climbed aboard. We figured out how much each person had to pay. I think we bought the boat, and then they paid us.
They had to pay us, yeah.
And then we get on the boat, and they, of course, give you the life jacket, which you're supposed to wear out of port. But as soon as you're out of port, they don't really care what you do. And you go shooting up this river on this, is it a dragon boat? I mean,
I don't know.
It's a long-tailed boat.
Yeah.
Making all kinds of noise, not serene at all. And then you get to the cave, and it's this massive opening on the side of a mountain that goes straight up. And it's like, oh, this is not going to be like Tamcoke or one of the other places.
So we went into the cave for quite a ways.
Yeah.
And then we turned around even, and we were starting out, and then they stopped the boat and tell us to get out. We're like,
okay.
Okay. And we're still in the cave. So this is not like anything we've done. This is definitely something new. So we get out and you kind of climb out, and then you go on this whole path through this cave, walking after you've just gone on the boat through it a little bit, a different part. And that was amazing. And I think
stunning structures.
It was just gorgeous. We loved it. It was fun to walk around. It was a little confusing here and there, trying to figure out where the path went, but overall it was pretty easy. And then you came out, and of course there were more cafes and stuff, and you could get a drink or whatever. Then you get back in the boat, and they drop you off at the start, which is where we could not get it. Remember, we could not get a ride. It was just a pain. So, like I said, we kind of wish we had taken the next day. We did go with the motorbike tour that the hotel offered, because we weren't going to do that 2 days in a row.
And that worked really good. And we just sat on the backs of the motorbikes, the 2 of us. We zipped off through the national park. We stopped a couple places. They brought us to Paradise Cave, which is a gorgeous cave.
And maybe our favorite out of
probably
all
my
the caves
favorite.
that we did. And we did a heck of a lot of them.
Yeah. It had the most stunning geological structures, stalagmites, of course.
Here's what I remember about it, though. They drop us off, and they're kind of not the main part of the parking lot. Like, the motorbikes have their own little hut.
Oh, yeah.
So they go take us to the motorbike hut, and we have to get to the main part. We go buy our tickets, and we think, okay, it'll be a little walk. Well, I think it was a couple of kilometers.
It was.
Of a walk. And then you get to the base of this mountain, and then you start you had 2 choices. You could go upstairs, or you could go winding up the mountain. So we wound up the mountain, and we came down the stairs on the way back.
Yeah.
And we wound up the mountain, and I'm thinking to myself, oh my goodness, this is hiking up the mountain. We did lots of that in Vietnam too.
We sure did.
And then we get there, we're sweating, we're tired, and you just walk by the entrance of the cave in that beautiful, cool
blasting
air.
Cool air.
Oh, so wonderful.
You just
I didn't
want to stand
move
there for an hour.
But then you get in the cave, and guess what you have to do?
Yeah. Climb
down. All these wooden steps. And then you walk through the cave. And I think we were in the cave a good hour and a half.
Yeah.
And there's, all these different little, it's one main path. It's easy to navigate.
Go down it and come back it.
But there's like little offshoots, like cul-de-sacs, I guess, off the thing. And there were really cool things to see. And there was a lot of people. But we were with some of the earliest. We had started out really early. So the cave was not that busy when we got there.
And we got there just ahead of, there were several tours that were dealing with their tickets as I got up and got my individual tickets. And then because there are tours, we took the buggy. Remember, we took the electric buggy. So we didn't have to do the walking because we're like, we know we're going to be doing a lot of walking today. Let's just take the buggy. It's only another 25 cents or whatever. So you do it.
And
but
it
then
was
all
worth
those
it.
tours had to wait and organize at the buggies. Yeah. So we got up to the caverns and we didn't have it to ourselves, but there were very few people in there when we walked all the way out to the end. Then as we were coming back, those tours were
I would
there.
say about 2/3 of the way out. Once we hit like almost to the end, the last third, last half, whatever, then we hit like
They were coming
hordes
in.
of
Mhm.
people.
Yeah. Yeah. And we're talking motor coach tours. So yeah.
So anyway, Phong Na itself is like this sleepy little town, and there are some restaurants and there are some coffee places, especially along the river. That's probably the most popular thing to do along the river is have a few coffees and stuff. And so that's where we suggest that you go, and you can either have a good lunch out there, but at least go and have a yogurt coffee.
Oh yeah.
Because the yogurt coffee, it's got like a little bit of a tangier taste than just having the
condensed milk.
Condensed milk in it. And a lot of times they'll put yogurt and like a fruit.
Ooh, banana coffee.
Yeah, it's so good.
Sounds so wrong.
Yeah, it's all different kinds of fruit, actually. Even jackfruit. So really cool stuff. Anyway, so we would suggest that you try the yogurt coffee there. You can get yogurt coffee, though, all over the country. And it is definitely something to try. It doesn't sound like it's going to be good, but like many things in Vietnam, it will surprise you. So we're down to our last two World Heritage sites.
And these are in the north. So Hanoi is the base for this. And in fact, one of them is right in Hanoi. And it's the central sector of the imperial city of Thang Long in Hanoi. This was built in the 11th century by the Viet des Ly dynasty. And it marked the independence of the Dai Viet. And there's actually a lot of history in Hanoi that in the museums that you can go and explore and find out a really good sense of the history of Vietnam in that time frame.
We really enjoyed the National History Museum there, and it did have a nice, good path, and it was easy to follow. I liked it.
So the imperial city was built on the remains of a Chinese citadel that had dated back to the 7th century. So this is old stuff. And there's not a whole lot there.
It was
still
for us.
today.
I think we were actually a tad bit disappointed in it
because we'd been to Hue and so many other sites. But what is there, I found still to be pretty interesting.
It was funny. I was thinking to myself, it's not my favorite thing. And then I started thinking of all the things that we did there, and I'm like, oh wow, it was pretty cool after all. So go.
Yeah, I mean, was it beautiful? Yes. Was it picturesque? Of course. But yeah, it paled, I think, a little bit in comparison to the imperial city in Hue.
Yeah.
But what I really thought was interesting about it was that they had been using this area for centuries and all the way up until present day during the American War or the Vietnam War, however you want to look at it. This was a command post.
Yeah.
And so you could still go through the command post, and it was set up, preserved, kind of what it looked like during the war.
And there was a bunker.
There's a bunker that you go in. They had displays showing how people survived during the bombings and that kind of stuff. I think I lost my umbrella there.
There were some, you lost your umbrella there?
Climbing in and out of one of the little bunkers.
So there were some good exhibits there and just some weird stuff. Like one of the things that we noticed is they had a whole garden or orchard of durian trees.
Yeah.
Which, if you know anything about durian, it's called the stinky fruit. And I've just never seen durian trees, that many of them. There were so many of them. They were all they were all fruiting. It was pretty cool.
Mm-hmm.
So it was pretty nice. It was beautiful. It was good photos. It was quiet. There were not nearly as many people there as there were in other parts of the city. So that was kind of nice. A little bit of a respite from, there wasn't hardly anybody there.
No.
I think
everybody was at the Temple of Literature.
Yeah,
which was
everybody was
crowded.
at the Temple of Literature, which is pretty cool. There's a lot of really good things to do in
It was nice.
Hanoi.
And it's a big sprawling grounds. So a lot to explore. It was pretty cool.
the whole city of Hanoi is really cool. And we've already done a first timers guide on it as one of our podcasts. And we, of course, we have articles on our website about things to do in Hanoi. So there's lots to do, but the Citadel is a World Heritage Site, so you don't want to miss it.
So what coffee are you going to pair?
Okay, so there's no choice.
Hanoi.
There's no choice in Hanoi. It is the home of the ever famous egg coffee, which was invented in the 1940s. And the reason they started using egg, which is kind of funny because you would think was because they didn't have access to a lot of products. It was during the Depression and they didn't have milk and things like this. So they
didn't have, a lot of times they didn't have electricity for months at a time. So they couldn't keep their milk without spoiling it.
But they had eggs.
There's chickens everywhere.
There's chickens still to this day everywhere.
Yeah.
Anyway, so we went to the place, to Gion Coffee, where it's the most famous. And I have to say, it was definitely delicious. It was so good, and we really enjoyed going there. What cracked me up about Gion Coffee, as famous as it is, I mean, it's so famous, like you can't look at Hanoi and not find Gion Coffee.
Someone's talking about Gion Coffee. You have to go there.
So we did. And you want to have an egg coffee. So we did. But it's on these little tiny stools. It's so traditional because being from Ho Chi Minh, we were used to.
We were kind of spoiled with the cafes there. They did have, of course, the little sidewalk cafes where you're sitting on.
And we used them occasionally.
You're sitting on plastic stools and you're sitting in the shade and sweating and hot, but still enjoying your cold coffee. But they had a lot more of the air conditioned cafes overlooking the street, some kind of theme to them. Yeah, so they're pretty cool.
Now, Hanoi is in the north and it does get cold there. And actually, the egg coffee is the one coffee. I mean, they have hot coffees, but this is the one coffee that's really designed to be drinking hot. And in fact, they'll serve it with a little bowl of hot water underneath it to keep it hot.
To keep the cup hot, yeah.
So it's really good. And it's basically beaten egg. And we loved it so much that we went to this one cafe called the Hanoi Coffee Station, and they were offering lessons for egg coffee. So my sister and I decided to take one, and that was a lot of fun.
We really enjoyed it. Handheld beater whipping action going on in that lesson, because that's really what it's about, is whipping the egg.
You whip the egg and then they tell you, a little bit more.
A little bit more.
Keep going. Anyway, but it was a lot of fun and it's delicious. Okay, and that brings us to our very last World Heritage Site. And apropos for us, it was the end of our trip to Vietnam. Yeah. And we had been in Vietnam since October, and here we are mid-June. So what was that, 7 months or whatever altogether. And we knew we were going to go to Ha Long Bay, and we wanted it to be kind of like our little last hurrah to say goodbye to Vietnam.
And it was a good idea.
And it was really the way to do it. And I suggest that if you are going to Vietnam and you're going to build an itinerary, I would do that at the end, just because it's relaxing, it's luxurious, you're pampered a little bit, and there's just,
and of course it's natural beauty beyond compare.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And it was just a good way to say goodbye to the country.
Yeah. So Ha Long Bay, probably there's nobody out there that hasn't heard of it or know what it is, but it's like 1,600 islands and islets with that spectacular limestone just shooting up out of the ocean, and caverns, of course, just really
little bays,
gorgeous area to go cruising around in your boat.
Like one of the places that we went to, that we chose to go to, is this little kayaking place, and you get into another boat to go to the kayaking area where you get into another boat, but they take you and basically to just a station, like almost like a taxi station in the middle of this whole huge bay. And that's where you get the kayaks. And then you have to go kind of through this little natural arch. And then there's a whole little bay in there it's just so cool. And there's so many different
on the mountains.
Yeah, there's monkeys. There's so many different, limestone geological features, and it's just so pretty. The sunsets were gorgeous. The only thing that takes away from it a little bit is that it's so popular that there's, I don't know, hundreds of ships. I don't know how many.
There are a lot of ships out there.
But pretty much everywhere you go, there's other people. That's the only maybe detriment. But again, we went during high season, and if you don't, maybe you have a little bit better time. I don't know.
Surprisingly, with all those ships out there where we all moored for the night, I was really expecting it to get pretty loud and like a party atmosphere that you'd hear from all the other boats. But that didn't happen. It was pretty quiet. It was really nice. And even though there are boats on the water, if you looked out at night, you would see the lights from the boats. And actually, it was a little bit pretty. But they didn't take away from the starscape above. There was no light pollution from the boats that was blocking out the stars. So that was really cool.
We really enjoyed it. And like I said, we did all kinds of things while we were out there. We went to the Pearls. We did some squid fishing, although that was kind of bust, but that's beside the point.
We did take a little excursion away from our main ship to a little bay where there was only one or two other boats there. And we were able to swim in the pristine waters, and you could swim to the shore and explore a little cave there. That was really cool.
Now, the thing about the boat is it's a cruise, and it's kind of like, the whole, we've got to feed a lot of people all at one time. So I thought, honestly, that the food was only mediocre as far as Vietnamese food goes. And the same goes with the coffee. I mean, yes, I could have as much coffee as I wanted, and they had all the different choices of coffees. But for me, it wasn't quite as good as being on land. But when we got off our boat, waiting for our transport back to Hanoi, there were quite a few cafes there. And that's where I would suggest you make sure you stop and enjoy a good coffee. And one of the ones that I like are the coffee smoothies.
Oh, yeah.
And basically, again, it's kind of like just a coffee shake with all kinds of different things in it, which are usually, ice cream, or in Vietnam, avocado, everything is popular. Avocado ice cream, avocado coffees.
Right.
Bananas, sapodilla, which is a kind of fruit, and jackfruit. And there's all kinds of them.
I never saw durian coffee.
I never saw durian coffee. That doesn't mean that doesn't exist. We just either didn't see it or ignored it. At any rate, it was a lot of fun. And the World Heritage Sites are in Vietnam are really well worth going to. They're done right. They're taken care of. For the most part, there's good infrastructure around it.
Yes.
You can get around. I think the hardest place we went to was definitely Phong Nha.
Mm-hmm.
But like I said, if you know what we know, then you just go to a place and then you let the hotel handle everything for you. And then it probably isn't any problem at all. There was a lot of places that we went to in Vietnam that I thought should have been on the World Heritage List. I was surprised that Phan Xiphan wasn't on it. I was surprised.
Waterfalls.
Ban Duc
and
Waterfalls.
The Magic Eye Mountain, or whatever it's called. Yeah.
Exactly.
Really beautiful.
Even like the Mekong River Delta and stuff is not on there, which just surprises me. So there's lots of things that aren't on the World Heritage List, but they're things that you will want to do. So you want to check out our itinerary when we do that post in that podcast. But for now, just enjoy a good coffee.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Streets and Eats. If you liked what you heard, please show us some love, hit the like button, and leave us a review. Maybe even subscribe so you don't miss any future podcasts. Also, we'd love it if you joined us on our Facebook private group, Streets and Eats, where we just have an ongoing conversation about all things travel. Ciao for now.